What's going on, everyone? I know I'm a little bit late to the party on this one, but with the buyout seemingly looming over Ubisoft, I wanted to go over a few things, talk about kind of how we got to this point, and why, in the end, none of it really matters. I'd like to give a shout out to Grums on X for basically compiling all this information. I'll try to give credit for all the articles where it's due. So from Culture Crave, Tencent and the Guillemot family are reportedly looking at a buyout of Ubisoft. Multiple games have underperformed in sales this year. Company has lost more than half its market share. Now I don't know the specifics, but I know Ubisoft is family owned in a way, and I know it can't be a hostile takeover. I'm guessing that this is almost a certainty that it's going to happen, whether it's Tencent or somebody else. What does that mean for Ubisoft? Grums. Ubisoft is considering a buyout, and journalist Tom Henderson expects a reduction of up to 40% of its staff. With 18,000 employees, Ubisoft has far more developers than almost everyone else. It suffers from severe bloat, increasing bureaucracy, encouraging DEI, and generally slowing everything down. He then goes on to state that Nintendo generates $61 billion in shareholder value with just 7,000 employees. Now, I agree that Ubisoft has way too many people employed. I don't know how many people make up the diversity, equity, inclusion staff, but even a 40% reduction of that, if the DEI staff gets cut, it's not like those ideas are just thrown out the window. That department will just get moved to HR. So how did we get to this point? I want to start with a game that I love very much. It's extremely underappreciated. I don't want to say it's underrated because it's rated highly and anyone who plays it loves it. And Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. A month after its release, it was reported that it sold about 300,000 copies. ADLV reported morale at Ubisoft is at an all-time low. New Prince of Persia game has 300,000 players. Now, one of the main reasons that this game underperformed is that you're selling a Metroidvania for $50. Why are you selling it for $50? It's because you have 18,000 people to pay. Obviously, 18,000 people didn't work on this game, but with that amount of employees, all that money, I guess, is really going into the same coffers. So you have to charge a premium for these games. Is this game better than Hollow Knight? In the eyes of about 99% of the player base, they would say no. Hollow Knight released for $15. Now, people who saw that the Prince of Persia was getting a 2D Metroidvania reboot were kind of upset about it, considering it is Ubisoft and they do have the money to be able to release something on a more grand scale. Once again, this game was amazing, but it didn't bring in people who weren't a fan of the genre. There was no crossover here. 300,000 players means that people who love Metroidvania games played this game. So that's strike number one. Strike number two, Skull and Bones. Ubisoft reportedly spent $650 to $850 million on Skull and Bones, a game that nobody asked for, a game that I think took about a decade to make. Now, 10 years ago, the space was a little bit different. At some point in the game's development, the industry shifted multiple times. Somebody on the inside should have known that there is no way that this game was going to sell well, and it didn't. It released on Steam at an extremely steep discount, and as of today, there's about 238 players right now, with a 373 24-hour player peak and a 2,600 all-time peak. So whether this is separate of the numbers that you get on Uplay or Ubisoft Connect, whatever, still terrible. Even if you triple these numbers, still terrible. So that brings us to the latest game, Star Wars Outlaws. Now, the budget for this game really hasn't been disclosed yet. I mean, if you look at all the other titles, I'm guessing it's somewhere between $200-400 million, another extremely bloated budget. After a month of its release, Star Wars has sold just 1 million copies in the month since it launched. Really nothing to scoff at. 1 million copies, but when you consider the budget, when you consider an established IP, when you consider it's a AAA title by one of the biggest publishers in the world, you expect a lot more. You know, Black Myth Wukong sold 20 million copies in its first month, and I use that game as an example because they were released around the same time. Nothing divisive about it. Those are both huge games, both priced similarly, and one sold 20 times the amount as the other. Now, imagine Black Myth Wukong. Yes, it's based on It's based on established Chinese lore, but this is Star Wars. How bad do you have to mess up to not have a Star Wars game sell well? I don't think it has anything to do with the fact that you're playing as a girl. Every Star Wars game that came before it, you played as a guy, or you played as some smattering of different characters, or it was a multiplayer game and you got to select, or you're playing as stormtroopers, whatever. It's not a big deal that you're playing as a girl. If the game was good, nobody would care. So a lot of people would say, well, Cyberpunk had a similarly bad launch with glitches and, high expectations that weren't met. But what people choose to forget is that CD Projekt Red had built up a lot of goodwill up until that point. You know what I mean? We were willing to allow CD Projekt Red to clean up their mess and release patches. And Cyberpunk is looked at as one of the greatest games of all time now. It took 2.5 years to get there. No amount of patches, nothing is going to make people flock to this game. It doesn't matter. Discounts, patches, promises, free outfits. The game did not resonate with the gaming population. So of course, Ubisoft CEO blames gamers after poor sales. I'm paraphrasing here. He said something to the effect of gamers have extraordinary expectations and that delivering solid quality is no longer enough. Okay? So solid quality. Are you telling me that you can meet our expectations with a $400 million budget when some of the highest reviewed games out there, most of the games that are sitting at overwhelmingly positive on Steam are indie games? Now, I don't know what he meant by this. Does he actually think that he released a mediocre game to us? Or is he saying that our expectations are too high for gaming these days? Either way, it's a terrible thing to say. Plenty of small, low-budget indie games made by 10 people on Steam are sitting at overwhelmingly positive, are played to this day, that people will die for. So I don't want to hear it that we have this insane amount of expectations. We're willing to buy games day one and play through all the bugs. Yeah, we're going to talk smack about it, but this is such a cop-out that you feel that that your team didn't release a game that was going to meet our expectations. What you're really saying is that our expectations are out of control, and you should know better than to dump hundreds of $millions into a game that nobody's going to like. So that leads us to Assassin's Creed. Now, people, almost since the release of Assassin's Creed, people have been hoping, wanting, asking for an Assassin's Creed game set in feudal Japan. Yes, it's been done before. Yes, there are tons of games set in feudal Japan, but something about an Assassin's Creed game in this setting made gamers salivate. Now, when they announced it that it starred Yasuke and a female. Yasuke is a black man. Now, if you want to say that he was real or not, or that, whoever wrote about him was a liar, and their history books, was he a samurai? Was he a servant? It doesn't matter. People did not ask for this. People do not want this. There are 2 samurai games on this scale starring Japanese men that sold extremely well. Ghost of Tsushima and Sekiro. Now, why do you feel the need to step out of the box? Why, after basically 3 huge flops in a row, do you decide to step out of the box and do something you know is going to be divisive? Yeah, people on social media like to make the point that if this game released 10 or 15 years ago, that nobody would have a problem with it and that everyone would think that a black samurai was cool. Yeah, you're right. Because it wasn't pushed in our faces so much. You weren't putting people of color in games and then talking about it like it's the main selling point of the game, which is what a lot of these developers do now. A lot of these community managers like to say, oh, this is the first game starring a gay character. This is female in games. Oh, we have a female character and it's the best thing ever. I mean, what were you thinking? This is it is almost idiot proof. An Assassin's Creed game in Japan. All you had to do was make it star a Japanese male. That is it. From history, from anything. Just not that. Which leads us to the Park Place reporting on a rumor that Assassin's Creed Shadow has about 7% the pre-order numbers of Valhalla during the same time period. You could take what you want from this. Gamers in general have been trying to stop the habit of pre-ordering games after getting burnt so many times. Valhalla and Cyberpunk released around the same time, close-ish. people have been burned far too many times on day one buys that now we're starting to wait until the week 1 patch, into the 1 month patch, until patch 3, 4 to buy these games. Okay, which leads us to one of the more recent things. I originally saw this post on Grums' X account. This guy, the monetization director at Ubisoft, I think this is on LinkedIn. Let's just read it. He goes, I rarely post on social media, but today I am sad, ashamed and sad. The gaming industry is rough at the moment. We all know it. But seeing how gamers, he puts that on quotation marks because he feels that the word gamer is an old term that we shouldn't use anymore, and that the people who consider themselves gamers need to be kicked out of the industry. How gamers react on social media, wishing ill fate to companies and people alike is sad. Weh. And not only toward Ubisoft. Yes, publishers and developers that hate us and are vocal about it on social media. We are happy when they fail. Even though it is always a vocal minority that expresses themselves on social media, that is false. That is false. Yes, it might be the ones that express themselves on social media, but the silent majority is also not buying your games. They just are not going to go post about it on SMS. I was hurt and ashamed to be a part of this community. Really? Like, how long have you been gaming for that this bothers you? What is even more revolting is coming on LinkedIn and seeing the same comments from people within the industry. Yeah, the same comments from people whose livelihood depends on the gaming industry thriving. Yes, they're upset. On top of exposing yourself as a clearly non-decent human being, he's calling you a racist and a bigot, you are affecting thousands of employees that are already impacted by all the hate despite doing their best to deliver incredible experiences. Most of these developers land on their feet. There's always a high turnover rate, especially at the entry level or even mid-level, so I don't know why this guy's super upset about this. How can you wish a company to fail because they do not cater to you or the product does not please you is beyond me. Okay, so that statement right there. If you're releasing a new game in your premier franchise that you've invested $400-500 million in, and you 100% need it to be successful, you better cater to those people who have been buying your games for 20 years. I don't care what the numbers say or your fake data that, oh, girls and this and that and this community and that community really resonates and we need to talk. No, they are this big. You have no idea the power that the so-called gamers that you hate actually have. We're the ones who pick up gaming when we're 8 years old and carry it into our 50s, not the ones that pick up gaming when it's trendy and then drop it, which is fine to drop gaming. It's not for everybody. A lot of people don't play it and have less and less time for it as they get older. But those people you should not worry about. This image in your head that you are going to go after this huge group of people who may or may not be playing games is such an amazing monetary failure, and we're the only ones noticing it. And meanwhile, huge companies are going out of business, and then I have to see Jeff Keighley at the Game Awards talk about how it's shameful that all these people are getting fired. You all are the one that will not take any criticism from anybody. Too many cooks spoil the broth. You need to be catering to us. So, we are all in the same boat. Please, triple please, stop spreading hate. We should all uplift each other instead of bringing each other down. This is what gets you into these problems in the first place. Don't criticize anybody. Don't go against the grain. Don't talk about the failure of games. This is why the industry is collapsing, which is a beautiful segue into my next point. EA claims to have more than 100 AI projects. CEO Andrew Wilson talked efficiency, expansion, and transformation at Investor Day 2024. He didn't say this at GDC. He's saying this at Investor Day. AI is not just a buzzword for EA, but it lies at the very core of our business. This is another one of the biggest publishers out. Wilson revealed that EA already has more than 100 active AI projects across 3 strategic categories: efficiency, expansion, and transformation. Now, to Wilson, he says, efficiency means EA driving more quality content for players more quickly and at less cost to the developer. Not to you! No. We will make these games for pennies on the dollar, and it will be shovelware. It'll be garbage crap, and we'll still charge you $70, $80. Cost us nothing. Expansion, meanwhile, is about giving devs an exponentially bigger canvas on which to create, enhancing games immersion factor, and using AI to advance characters' depth and intelligence. Not buying it. Not buying it. We're not there yet. I don't think so. Lastly's EA take on transformation is to look much further into the future at new ways players will connect, create, and watch video game content. So what this really is going to do is that companies like EA, seeing what Ubisoft just went through with basically 4 failures in a row that crumbled their entire business, they will use AI to release 10 to 15 games every 3 months, and it'll be in the most popular genres. You'll have a battle royale game, you'll have a fighting game, you'll have a first-person shooter, you'll have a Metroidvania, you'll have a survival game, you'll have a Pal World Pokemon-style game. And whatever doesn't work, garbage. One of them hits, boom. What does it matter if the other one fails? They were basically made exclusively by AI, cost us nothing to make, and gamers are idiots, and they'll find one game to glom onto because some popular streamer plays it and now it went viral. That's all it is. They're just scratching lottery. They'll just be scratching lottery tickets with these games. One of them will hit, boom, jackpot. There you go, investors. It'll happen constantly. And in the meantime, you'll be getting these soulless garbage games that nobody wants to play. So I don't think that we really need to be worrying about AAA developers not having our interests in mind, and DEI and unemployed and people being out of jobs because games fail, and the vocal minority on Twitter, etc., etc. We really need to be worrying about AI completely destroying what's left of the industry. And it's coming. It is right around the corner. So, it's been a fun ride. I suggest you buy a bunch of games on Good Old Games, DRM free games, a bunch of indies, wait for a sale, get a bunch cheap games you would never play. Because honestly, that's all you're going to be able to play in the future. Anything coming out in the next 10 to 20 years is almost guaranteed to be crap. You're going to have to pick one game every year. So, it's been fun. It's been real. That's really all I have to say about that. Later.